Danny Elwood, United States Navy veteran. And I'll be your MC today. And I'd really like to welcome all of the Tri-County women veterans that are here today, their families, all of our wonderful ambassadors, and our special guests. Please stand now for the honor guard.
Honor guard, halt. Left, face.
Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance now, please.
Present arms.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor guard, retire the flag.
Port arms. Right, face. Forward, march. Left, left.
Now we have the Tri-County Women Veterans Chaplain, Christina Regal.
Let us pray. Almighty God, I'm humbled to be here, the actual church that walked the talk and fed my father for the last 18 months of his earthly life. Thank you. And thank you for greeting us today. We invite you this Women's Veterans Recognition Celebration commemorating June 12, 1948, when President Truman signed the Women's Armed Service Integration Act. Thank you. I thank you for acknowledging your yearning for a relationship with us, dear God. For when we have felt misunderstood by our colleagues in arms, you understood us. When we felt dismissed, you acknowledged us. When we may have experienced rejection, you accepted us. When we may have experienced disillusionment, you valued us. And when we may have experienced abuse, you validated us. And when we do experience sorrow, you indeed continue to comfort us. Father God, please give wisdom and lessen the fear or the earthly anxiety of anyone speaking and sharing with us today as they challenge and they encourage us. Thank you also for the food that we will partake, for we know we never go a day hungry, and that we are privileged to be able to say so. For all the diligent workers that made this day a reality in this celebration, we recognize them and we thank them too. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Danny. My name is Betsy Nolan, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of Tri-County Women Veterans. What's that?
Your hair looks good.
Thank you. There's a joke behind that, I can tell you. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate Women Veterans Recognition Day and honor the remarkable women who have served our nation. As I look around this room, I am reminded that every woman veteran carries a story of service, sacrifice, leadership, and resilience. Together, those stories form a legacy that continues to strengthen our military, our commitment, in our nation. Tri-County Women Veterans was founded on a simple belief that women who serve deserve connection, recognition, and support long after military service ends. Today, our organization serves more than 400 women veterans across Lake, Sumter, and Marion counties. We create opportunities for friendship, service, wellness, education, and advocacy. Today, we also commemorate the Women's Armed Services Integration Act. This act was signed in 1948 and was a landmark legislation that opened new doors for women in uniform and helped shape the opportunities available to future generations. While much has changed since 1948, one thing remains constant. Women veterans are an essential part of America's military history. They are also an essential part of its future. To every veteran, man or woman here today, thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and your continued commitment to making a difference in the lives of others. And yes, for proving that adaptability isn't just a military skill, it's a lifelong advantage. Before we begin our program, I would like to recognize our distinguished guests at my table. Vanessa Thomas, Florida Department of Veteran Affairs, State Women Veteran Coordinator. Dr. Tweet Coleman, Vice President of Avid HBOT and owner of Leaki Health in the Villages. Lisa Honka, CEO of Your Key to Senior Living Options. We also have our Vice President, Kelly Dobson, and our Treasurer, Denny Elwood. To our Honor Guard Commander, Peggy Campbell. One of the tables on our left is the Women's History and Cultural Center. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. David Whitaker, who will meet later on in the program, President of Mid-Florida Historical Appreciation and Preservation Society. At that same table, who's the Vice Mayor of Traverse, Florida. Also, last but not least, Sue Roper, Florida Veteran Hall of Fame. A special shout out to our Tri-County Board and Committee Chairs. Thank you for your leadership and steady hand behind the scenes. Thank you all for being here and helping us celebrate this special occasion. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to our MC and Treasurer, Danny Elwood. Danny, the program is yours.
Thank you, Betsy. It's a true honor to welcome each of you here today as we gather for the Women Veterans Recognition Day. A day set aside by our nation to celebrate our courage, leadership, and sacrifice of the more than 3 million women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. Today, we recognize not only our service, we celebrate our legacy. 78 years ago, in 1948, President Harry Truman signed the Women's Armed Services Integration Act, finally granting women a permanent place in our nation's military. That landmark law changed the face of the armed forces forever. Before that day, women had always served, sometimes without recognition, sometimes without the right uniform or rank, but they served nonetheless. From the patriots who disguised themselves to fight in the Revolutionary War, to the nurses who risked their lives in World War I, to the code breakers, pilots, mechanics of World War II, women answered the call long before they were officially asked. And when that door finally opened in 1948, women didn't just enter it, they kicked it wide open for the generations to follow. Today, our women veterans represent leadership in every corner of the military. Command posts, cockpits, aircraft carriers, submarines, surgical units, and beyond. They serve in every branch and in nearly every role once deemed off limits. And yet we know that service doesn't end when the uniform is retired. Each of us here today continues to serve as mentors, as Tri-County Women Vet role models, business leaders, public servants, and pillars in our communities. We continue to embody that same spirit of courage and selflessness that defined our time in uniform. Many of you here know what it means to break barriers, not for glory, but out of sheer commitment to service. You were told no and you kept going. You were underestimated and rose higher. You served in places
and under conditions that demanded not only skill and strength, but grace under pressure. You carried on through deployments, family separations, and moments that most Americans never fully understand. You served with resolve and with heart, proving time and again that patriotism knows no gender. Your stories of courage, innovation, perseverance form the living history of the United States military, and they demand to be heard. The Military Women's Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, by the way, our only all-women veteran memorial in the United States dedicated to telling her story. It stands as a testament to that legacy. Each name inscribed, each photo displayed, each story told reminds us that the strength of our national defense has always included women. But I believe the most powerful stories belong to those who don't always make headlines, the stories that are in this room. Each of us has a story, a moment of courage, a difficult choice, a time when we led others or lifted a fellow service member in need. Those are the stories that define true heroism. Those are the stories that younger generations need to hear. And today we will hear from two of our own. So today we celebrate, not just for those in our service uniform, but for all of our continued leadership and resilience. We celebrate the progress that we've made and the progress still to come. We also remember the women who served before us, those who never heard the words thank you, those who never saw recognition in their lifetime, and those that gave their lives in service to this nation. Their sacrifices make this moment possible. And we look to the young women who follow, the young women who may see us here today in this room, on this stage, or in photographs and realize that could be me someday. Our example gives them the permission to dream bigger, to lead boldly, and to serve bravely. To all of you veterans here today, thank you for lifting your hand and taking the oath of service. Thank you for your resilience, your trailblazing spirit, and your continued dedication to making our nation stronger. We have proven and continue to prove that service, courage, and leadership have no limits. Today we honor our past, we celebrate our present, and we believe boldly in our future, because we are, and always will be, the heart of American service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your strength and your story. And happy Women Veterans Recognition Day. Our FDVA letter, what do we call it? A tribute to women veterans.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Women Veterans Recognition Celebration Day in Florida, June 12th, 2026. Whereas in Florida, we fully support the veterans and service members who call our great state home. And whereas over 1.4 million veterans living in Florida, we are recognized as one of the most military and veteran-friendly state in the nation. And whereas okay, so I'll stop doing the whereas and then we'll let the audience. Okay. Florida has the second largest population of women veterans in the United States. We salute and honor our 172,000 women veterans who have made the commitment to protect our state and nation. And these women answer the call to serve, putting their lives on the line to ensure our nations remain the land of the free. And in 1948, President Harry Truman signed into law the Women's Armed Service Integration Act, which enabled women to serve a permanent member in all branches of the military. And Women Veterans Recognition Celebration Day in Florida is an opportunity for Floridians and Americans to recognize the caliber of character and the courage of all women who have answered and continue to answer the call to serve in defense of freedom, values that our nation holds so dear. Thank you, everyone.
We do like our whereases. So we're going to break for lunch now, and when we come back from lunch, we're going to have two speakers. Our first speaker today is Terri Zeiger, United States Army. Come on, Army. Terri's span of service starts with her being in the Women's Army Corps through to being an Army soldier after they disbanded the WACs. She is active in our Tri-County Women Veterans Golf Group and has a movie star dog. If you haven't seen her, when we did the Welcome Back Vietnam at VMP, she had LG with her little guy. So her little Yorkie was in a movie about a World War II Yorkie named Smokey who pulled cables through tunnels and walls. And now she lives here in the Villages and is loving her life. So please, welcome Terri Zeiger.
We're going to talk about the Women's Army Corps. That was the very first thing I heard when I went off the plane in Anniston, Alabama, back in 1971. Back in 1971, when I became a Women's Army Corps member. I was a member of what they call Charmin' Charlie, because at that time, we were interested in mostly is, again, the WACs were mostly in clerical. We were in communications, we were in medical, those sort of things. So what we were most interested in at that time was makeup and hair care classes. That I still remember. Okay. We were also interested in things that had not a lot to do with the military, but some. But the thing that was interesting about this whole thing is where we went with this. Now, she said I could go forward. What you're seeing up on the screen, that was our uniform. That was the Army utility uniform for the WACs. The big issue was whether or not we could make that skirt stand up in the corner with enough starch. If we could, we let it go. So here's what ended up happening. When we were in the military, the Women's Army Corps, they began to realize that we had other talents that we could probably do. But my very first duty assignment, when I was sent in, had to do with affirmative action. A lot of affirmative action. So pretty much my career follows everything that had to do with affirmative action. The Women's Army Corps part had a lot to do with that. Now I can remember, like I said, we had makeup and hair care classes, but at the time when I was in Anniston, Alabama, and I was also in Fort McClellan, Alabama, we were having race riots. And the race riots were very prevalent, very hard, and they actually were hitting onto the base. And at the time we had in the middle of the aisle, we had what they call God's Aisle. And on either side, we had the barracks. We had a row of beds, a row of wall lockers, a row of bed. The middle aisle, nobody could walk in that. That was God's aisle. The only one that could walk on that was the drill sergeant. So that night, it was late. And all of a sudden, the doors bang open. And here comes some of the biggest black women I've ever seen in my life, coming up through that God's aisle. Now, we had a couple of small black people with us, a little bit. She was my bumping right next to me. She was 4'11". I don't think she barely made the height requirement. Well, they came up and she sat up. She said, "What's going on?" They said, "Sit down." She sat down. They left. Well, pretty soon after that, here come the MPs chasing those through. But what was also happening there, and why this is relevant, you'll know about it, put it together a little bit later, is we then had to protect our barracks. So that night, I, Little Bit, and Kathy Schofield were put into the stairwells with a baseball bat. And we were supposed to defend our barracks with the baseball bat. Well, that was rather interesting in that I sat there and was complaining, and this little lady comes down the stairs with white hair, and we complained to her about everything. Well, at that time, too, if you got recycled, that was the worst thing in the world that could ever happen to you, because that was it. You're just going to have to be recycled, and you'd never get out of it for the rest of your life. Well, we talked to her, we complained to her, and about a week and a half later, we had what we had called the General's Inspection. So we're standing in our wall locker with all of our stuff that we had there. Oh, at that time, we wore white seersucker uniforms also. We had to wear the girdles, and the girdles were the snap up, So anyway, we're standing there waiting for this coming around the corner. Here comes this white-haired lady. And oh my God, I'm going to be recycled for the rest of my life, because it was General Bailey. And it had been the lady that was in the stairwell that I was complaining about everything. She said, not to worry, let these guys go. These are going to be good soldiers. So that was the beginning of my career, and from there I was transferred to Oakland Army Terminal. We still had the Vietnam War going on at that time, and I was working communications. Our biggest enemy at that time was the civilians, because everywhere we went, we'd have some kind of a challenge by them. And I won't go into that because most of you already know a lot about that. But at that point then too, I found out what it was like to be discriminated against, not only as a soldier, but as a woman in different things that we were at. Well, then I was transferred to Europe. And in Europe, somebody decided that I'd make a great speaker. So I began teaching race relations, human relations when that came out. I was one of the very first white women that they put into the program. Hated it, absolutely hated it. But what I was there to do was to teach about women in the service and the integration. It became quite an interesting concept because people then began to realize what we were capable of doing. In the meantime, back home, they're starting to talk about disbanding the Women's Army Corps. But also what they started talking about at that time is they started to say, we need Volar Army. We're going to start volunteer army. Well, that volunteer army got me into recruiting duty. And when I was sent to recruiting duty, then somebody saw me and decided to make a great recruiter. I don't know why. I guess I just looked the part because all of a sudden they needed to have women out there recruiting. Now you have to understand also that at that time, we were having a shortage of people. People were getting out of Vietnam, and male soldiers were leaving. We didn't have the mid-level management that we needed to have in the WACs. Most women were getting out of the service with about 4 years, 5 years, so we didn't have senior people. Well, while I was in recruiting duty, I happened to pass my MOS test with 100%. The SOP says that you automatically get promoted to the next rank. Well, that made me an E7, because by then I'd already been promoted 6 and now I was a 7. So then something interesting happened. I was very marketable. I was now a veteran, Vietnam veteran, minority, looking up like a minority, pastor one, Asian, and veteran, Vietnam veteran, woman, and minority. Oh, and by that time I had my master's degree. I had a chance to finish my degree. So I was pretty marketable, so I had all of these companies that were saying, hey, come on, Terri, come to work for us. Well, I get a call. And when I get a call, I was called in and say, Terri, we want you to stay. And we have this new program called MatchWax that's coming out. And what we have to do is we need to integrate women NCOs into training. We don't have enough of you. And someone like you that has the education, has the rank, all the rest have to go. I said, wait. Does this have anything to do with drill sergeants? Oh no, you don't have to worry about being a drill sergeant. I said, okay, that's all right, because I didn't want to be a drill sergeant. Because I was living a pretty high life. You know, here I was most of the time by myself. I had my car. You know, I was mostly civilian as a recruiter. Well, just happy with being just where I was at. Well, they came back and they said, you know what, Terri, we want to keep you because the best shot, you got one of the best shots going up for Sergeant Major. We have to promote women to Sergeant Major eventually. And we have to open these ranks up. So we'd like to give you the opportunity to do this. So I thought about it for a little while and I thought, okay. But you know what also helped? That big bonus they gave me for doing it. That really helped. So anyway, my surprise came when I was now assigned to TRADOC. And what TRADOC is training and documents. That was a program that was started back in the late 70s. That was a program that probably a lot of you have heard a lot about it since then. But it had just started. And that was the one that was to develop all of the training for all of the rest of everything for combat and for integrating women into combat skills. So when they started this program, the very first thing that they said that we need to do is that we need to get women into weaponry. So they were doing that before I had a chance to get into my position. Well, in 1978, they decided to change the Women's Army Corps and make it women soldiers. My whole world got rocked. Because I'd already said, yeah, I would do this. I would go ahead and do it. And so what ended up happening then is I became one of the very first female combat soldiers. Now, believe it or not, combat, interesting. Depends on what you want to call it. We've been in combat for a very, very long time. Whether or not you want combat where you're actually in the area or where the combat is going on, or if you actually want to be one of the ones that's out there possibly getting killed. Depends on which kind of combat you're talking about. But for a very long time, we've all been in combat. But women had never been trained in leadership positions. And we all had these MOSs, military occupational skills. But because we had these skills and moving into these skills, they had to make a decision as to how many women could actually be in each unit to make it effective. We found that in some units, we could have as few as 10%. As other units, we could have as much as 25%. But the problem that we had is we didn't have the NCOs, nor did we have the officers that were available to train. TRADOC made a decision that every unit had to at least have one female officer and one senior NCO. So now we got all of these requirements, but no senior NCOs, none of that. So TRADOC then decided to start the training. So my very first day, I was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia. I'm sitting in the bleachers with all these other senior people, most of them male, most of them with combat badges, most of them from Vietnam, some of them special forces, me and about 5 other women. And we're sitting there. And there was an E8 walking down front. He says, I don't have to ask this, but is there anybody here, because you're all senior people here, he says, is there anybody here that doesn't know how to handle a weapon? I raised my hand. He said, I cannot believe that an E7 in the United States Army doesn't know how to handle a weapon. I said, look, Sarge, I was a whack, and I was a recruiter. All I had to do was talk a good game, and the whole bleachers came down. Well, I am here to tell you that my whole world was rocked at that point, because I learned everything you wanted to know about combat skills after that. For the next 2.5 years, I was in training. I learned every combat skill, every combat tactic, everything that the men had learned to do. It was interesting because I was sent out to the field with guys that laughed at us. I'm only 5'2". Now you have to picture, that's the first women combat uniform. That's me in Grenada, and we'll go into a little bit more. But that uniform that you see there was the very first combat uniform that we had. The problem with that uniform was it was based upon NATO requirements. That was for the men only. The problem with that uniform, and I'm reasonably well endowed in the back, okay? So the problem with that is when they gave me the uniform, I couldn't fit it in the hips, but the legs and everything were too big. The tail was out here like that. You couldn't, and you weren't allowed to tailor them, right? The sleeves were too long. They'd come down like this, come over the breast. The helmet was too big. It'd come down over my head. I'd have to go up like this. But the worst part of all was that gun. That gun was too long. I mean, every time I take the gun, the gun. They put me in a foxhole, I'd have to be on 5 sandbags. I look like an anti-aircraft. So then you put me in the pack, it hits me back here, and it hits me back here. By the time I get the pack, you put the guns, a pair of pants that are tied up around here like this, the Alice pack that's hanging down here, the helmet that's like this. I look like a pile of army surplus with feet. And if I fell down, I wasn't going to get as a turtle, you know. So these are all things that they expected us, you know, to do. So we started changing the uniforms. We started changing the way things were done. We'd had problems with the boots because they would give blisters. And then, of course, when we started the training, I can remember one time they sent our squad out, and the guys would do interesting things to us. Like one time, we were on rappelling, and I'm up on the rappelling thing, getting down, and you gotta understand this, I'm in the makeup and hair care classes. I mean, this whole thing was really not my idea of what I wanted to do. So I'm standing up here on this big tower, looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, oh, God. So they said, come on, start going down. So I start to go down and get back, it stops. I'm hanging so many 100 feet off the ground, and I'm just hanging there, and the guys are laughing. I said, somebody do something, because I didn't have enough weight to get me down off the thing. Well, finally, after about 15 minutes and all of them laughing, and finally I said, you know what? You guys are gonna pay big time if you don't get me off this thing. Well, they got me off. Somebody had to come up overhand to get me down. So that just showed you we had to adjust the weight requirements when we sent women for the arrested repelling or any of the things for the exercises like that. We had to adjust for the guns because, again, the weight. When we shot with machine guns, things like that. We all had to adjust the weight, all of those things for us. So as time went on, we began to change those things, and it became a little bit easier to do. Well, the program, like I said, Max Wax, what it was designed to do was basically stop the, I guess the charming school that they thought that wax were in, or women soldiers would do. So we have now implemented all of the combat skills, everything that we could do, and we implemented one of everybody in all of the different trainings. Still the problem was, though, is they still wouldn't let us be in infantry, armor, or artillery. We did open up aviation, we did open up some of those, but the direct combat forces, or combat that you could do, was generally kept away from us. We couldn't do that. But there was an interesting thing about all that, too, is there's a certain thing called attachment versus assignment. Okay, if you're assigned, you could not be assigned to a combat unit, but nobody said you couldn't be attached to one. Okay, so what ends up happening is we get attached, and we now start into actually going into combat. So I became one of the very first certified Army combative instructors. What that means is I'm one of the baddest, meanest asses walking. And I can hurt you if I needed to, okay? Back then, not so much now. But I thought that, and that's what we were trained to do. And the Special Forces guys that we went out with and trained with, I have to give them credit for that. They had a lot of patience with us and things like that. But there were times, I have to tell you, the very first time that I went out with an entire squad, one of the things I neglected to think about was women need sanitary things that we normally didn't think about. There's an SOP list out of checklists, everything that you have to make sure that your soldiers have. Well, I'm here to tell you there was nothing there about female hygiene, and I was worried about everything else as we're going down one. Well, we get out to the field, sure enough, I get told we don't have any of the Tampax or Kotex that we need. I said, swim. So I have to go to TALK is communication site. Had to go and I had to radio in. I need somebody to bring out this stuff. Well, here they come, helicopter. We met First Sergeant Zeiger, cotton delivery. So, I'm here to tell you there's not one woman that I've been with ever since that was ever in my squads or ever with me that ever forgot that ever again. Ever. Then we were out again one night, and the guys, one of the things that's interesting thing that you have to know too, is in combat and with men, most of the camaraderie or most of the planning is actually done away from the office, or it's in the tent at night when they're sitting talking. Well, we're separated. And so as we're separated, we don't get in on all that good stuff. So a lot of times I wasn't getting the information that I needed to have, and something was changed. So I'd be working off of maybe a sheet of paper that was yesterday's stuff, and I didn't know something had changed. But nobody would tell me that, and nobody would give it. One night I spent an entire night in a tree in a swamp in North Carolina because we didn't have the right coordinates as to where to go. And now that's a true adventure living, sleeping in a tree in a swamp in North Carolina. So then after that, we finally passed. Now one of the things that we had to do is we had to pass a lot of tests. And once we passed those tests, then we were qualified for combat. Well, about this time, after all the training, we started the basic leadership courses, the BNOC, ANOC, and advanced courses and Sergeant Majors Academies. And I was involved in all of the training and the documents and everything that had to take place for developing those programs that are still used today. So what ended up happening, Grenada started. And when Grenada started, that was the first major big deployment that we had in the first time. Actually, Grenada was the first one. Just Cause through Panama was the one that I was actually involved in. We had 450 women, 400 to 500 women that were deployed to Grenada, and I was one of them. I had a communications unit that I was sent out with, and we went after Noriega for a number of different reasons. But this was one of the first times that we were actually had fighting in town, in a town area. That picture with the blue at the back is actually one of the town areas, and that's me. The problem with this whole thing was we didn't really know what we were doing. And now let me tell you about training. When you're in training, all of it is controlled, all right? You can have, they can put you through every kind of training you can imagine, but in your brain, you still know that I'm safe because somebody's going to take care of me. I don't have actual live bullets shooting me. I don't have any of these things happening. So I can get through all this training. So that's when I say now when you hear the women say, I went through Ranger training. Well, good. But, you know, that was all controlled and all the rest of the stuff. So I'm not all that excited about it. But if you're actually out there now in the mud and the crud, it's a very different situation. I can remember the very first time I got shot at. The bullet went over my head. I stopped. It was like the entire world stopped. Everything stopped. It was completely silent. And all of a sudden my back was pulled, and it was pulled down to the ground. And my other NCO that was with me said, what the hell's wrong with you? Get down. But it was like it was surreal. And here I've been going through all this training, teaching, and everything else with it like that. We'll fast forward now to Desert Storm and Desert Shield. When we were there, the biggest problem for me was we had reserve women coming in that hadn't been trained the way they needed to be trained, and we were trying to integrate them into a system that they weren't ready for. And unfortunately, we had a lot of problems, and thank God that it was only a 100-hour war. But one thing that I remember is I remember standing on a tarmac in Washington State, standing with 1,000 people out there, standing thinking to myself, oh my God, did I do them well? Did I train them well enough? Did I teach them well enough? And the balloon music started to play. Somebody turned on the electric slide. I have 1,000 troops out there dancing electric slide around their equipment. All of a sudden the balloon goes up. And as the balloon goes up, that means everything goes. Pick up your gear, go. And I'm standing there thinking, oh my God, please God, let me train them well enough. Please God, let me make sure that I get done the things that I need to do. And I sent them to war. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, hoping that by God I trained them and I did what I needed to do. So then after Desert Storm and Desert Shield happened, we had a lot of challenges there, as most of you probably know about it. And then we went on moving into the Gulf War. There we worked more than, my job was to work more with the public. And the chiefs and stuff that were there, we were trying to put in housing, we were trying to put in hospitals, things like that. And my challenge was working with the chiefs, because I'm a woman. They didn't want to work with a woman. But interesting thing about it is that they respected the rank and they respected the authority. Except one time, I'm standing there in my dress uniform with the gold on it, and I'm trying to get the troops to come with me, and my lieutenant was over there and he wouldn't come. I said, will you come on? He says, wait a minute. He says, we got this chief up to $500 in gold and four camels for you. They were selling me. It's like, you're selling me to the chief. So now I could go in to talk to the chief, and if I got the left hand like this on him, he wasn't going to listen to me. But if I got the right hand like this, he might listen to me. But 9 times out of 10, he wasn't going to listen to me if it was just me. But if I brought in an E5 or an E4 or even a lowly E1 male with me, he'd listen to me, and we could get things done. But that's how it began to transition. They began to have more respect for us, more chance than the higher rank we were, the more we got the respect. Well, this is now towards the end. And by this time, we realized all the challenges that we had working in the Middle East and working with integrating women into combat and the rest of it. And we still had always been basically into service-type jobs. But the thing was, is it had taken away from us. We are no longer isolated. We had Scud missiles coming in. We had women killed by the Scud missiles coming into areas that we thought were safe. So now, to be in combat means you're there, period. No matter what it is, you are in combat, all right? So this argument about, well, women should be in combat, women should be in armor, women should be in infantry. My question again is, do you really want to be in the ones that get you killed? I mean, okay, fine, if that's a big deal to you, that's fine. That might be what you want to do. But the fact is that you should have that opportunity. So then what ended up happening, we weren't training. We weren't getting the information that we needed to have about the Taliban, about the rest of it. So one of the things that we realized from women like me and the others going out and talking to them, that they would talk to us. So we then started the development of the programs called the Lion programs and the women that would now be embedded with the troops. We started that program in 2002. In 2003, after 9/11 happened, 9/11 happened, I was due to get out, but I was pulled back and held back. So I had 2 more years that I finished, and at that point I worked with the Lioness program, or the programs for the Lioness. The way that got started was jumped, because there was a brigade commander that was having trouble getting information that he needed, so he went and asked several of the women in his unit, which one was a medic, one was a truck driver, one was a clerk, and a couple of others, if they would go out with the troops and see whether or not they could get some help. Well, these women ended up in firefights. These women were actually out there fighting and killing with the rest of them. But they made some headroads. The problem also was that these women were Army women. They embedded them with Marines. The signals, everything else is different, totally different than what it was for the rest. So we then had to realize that we had to design a set programs so that everybody could find these standard SOPs. So hence come the beginning of the Lioness programs, the beginning where we begin to embed people, or women with men. And what would happen is the men, they'd open up whatever they had, then the women would go in and talk to the children, or talk to the wives, or whatever else. We started making movements forward. What ended up happening is how we got women started in that is we went nationwide through all of the services, and we asked for women to volunteer. There was 1,000 women volunteered. Of the 1,000 women, within a week, 500 of them were gone. Within the next week, we only had 200. There was ultimately 20 women that made it through all of the training, exactly like Rangers, exactly like Delta Force. They were embedded with these guys. They did a great job. They were able to make a lot of movement, get a lot of information that was needed from the women, because if our men would go in and touch even the underwear of the Taliban, the Iraqi women or Afghani women, they could be killed. Their noses could be cut off, their ears could be cut off, anything else like that. So it was working well to have the women there, but the problem was we still had male interpreters. So we went nationwide. You know who volunteered? Second generation Muslim women. They got paid $250,000. But they made the job and they made it happen. So all things considered, 2003 I said, I'm done, I'm tired, I've had enough. And I started seeing the changes, and we started seeing more and more women get hurt. To this day, as it stands now, we have 700,000 women that are on disability. So my question to you is, at what cost? I ask you, we're able to do this, we're in the combat, but at what cost? What are you willing to pay? Thank you.
That was incredible. I really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Laura Kelly, United States Army again. Laura's career was very, pardon? Oh, go Army. All right, yes. It was so quiet. You need to have more than one person saying that. Let's try it again. All the Army people. Go Army. Thank you. All right. Laura's career was very interesting and couldn't have happened when I was in the service in the 70s, early 70s. As you saw in Laura's bio in the program, she was a pilot. But what's not in there is that while she was serving, she met many interesting military characters. And one in particular had a story that touched Laura, and she wasn't sure his story would survive. So she wrote his story and eventually published it and has a book out about this guy. She did lots of magazine articles about other characters. But please, for now, please welcome Laura Kelly.
Hello. Hi. I'm nervous. Anyway, I want to give you just a little bit more information about me. I was born and raised in a family where my parents loved to travel. So I got to go with them overseas, and I learned at a very young age. We're very lucky to live in this country. So when I was older, and I wanted to go in the military because I wanted to be part of the force. So I went in and I talked to an Air Force recruiter. This was in Maryland, and about the mid-'80s when I did this. And we talked about my options. Now, at the time, I had my private pilot's license, but I did not have a 4-year degree. If you want to fly in the military, you have to be a commissioned officer, and you have to have a 4-year degree. So I knew I couldn't fly, but it was never about flying. I just wanted to be part of the force. And so with this Air Force recruiter, we went over my options. On my way out the door, he said, by the way, there is a place you could fly right now. I said, there is? And he said, yeah, it's right across the hall. And I saw United States Army Recruiting Station. And I said, nah, that's for me. But I went home, I thought about it, and I thought, don't have any regrets. So 2 days later, I went in and talked to the Army recruiter, and he told me about the Warrant Officer Program. And it's the Warrant Officer Aviation Helicopter Program. The more he talked about, I never heard of it. The more he talked about it, the more I liked it. And I thought, well, I'll have it in my contract where if the Army says you're terrible, get out, or I said I want out, I was out. And then I go talk to the Air Force guy. So went to basic at Fort Jackson. It was all women, 40 ladies. It was actually kind of fun. You do things in basic training you will never do anywhere else in your life. And we actually, it was really actually had fun. The fun stopped when I went to Fort Rucker. That was a warrant officer candidate school that mirrors officer candidate school. So it's almost exactly the same, but it's bigger. I was the only woman in a class of 100. Now that sounds like it'd be fun. It's not. Let me tell you. From there, when I graduated from there, I went to flight school, which was at Fort Rucker, just up the street. Again, I was the only woman in my class, and for 2 classes in front of me and 3 classes behind me. The whole 10 months I was at Fort Rucker in flight school, there were 6 women total that went through. So it was just, we were just pioneering. Don't get me wrong, there are women in the military, they just don't want to fly. So I kind of had the bug, and I guess I always did. Graduated from there. Now, what I want to talk about is I went to Desert Storm, and this is about combat warriors, combat women, combat warriors. And I want to stick to that theme. So just talking, and I was attached to the 4th Infantry Division. I was in Europe. If you recall, the Berlin Wall, when the Berlin Wall came down, they started closing bases in Europe. I was in Europe, and our base was being closed, and a whole bunch of people there in Europe that they took and brought them down into Desert Storm. So I was a reserve pilot for the 4th Infantry Division, just south of Tapline Road. I was late getting to the party. They already had assigned crews. I'm sorry. Oh, so this is flight school. Take a look at this picture on the bottom and see if you can find the only woman. This was our ceremony before we got our wings. If you can find the only woman in that group. So that was my flight class when I graduated. Anyway, so I was in, when I was...
Behind the guy carrying the flag. First row behind the...
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, very good. So, from there, when I was in, with flying as a reserve pilot, I had since I was reserve, I brought my lounge chair and I brought my correspondence courses because I was working on my classes, and I sat there in the desert and worked on my classes. But we have to talk technology. It's important. The technology upstep is profound. If you remember the last time that we were in the desert in a combat situation was World War II. It was 50 years. The uptake in technology and what we now were dealing with, we were on a severe learning curve. It was about something called gas turbine engines. That's what our helicopters had. That was not the piston engines like in your car anymore. So real quickly, because I know I have a few minutes. So you have a compressor section that sucks the air in, compresses the air, and then pushes the air into the combustion chamber where it mixes with the fuel. The fuel was Jet A, so it's like a little mini fireball that you need more power, you add more air, and you add more fuel. Well, what happened in the desert? Go all the way back to the beginning of the engine. You have something called a filter. And the filter would filter out the air. Now, it was the Arabian desert is a very, very fine, silty sand. It's like a talcum powder or powdered sugar. It's not like this out here. This is granular stuff. It actually gets in your nose, it gets in your eyes. Just very, very fine. The air is always moving. We had to fly close to the ground, 100 feet, as helicopters, 100 feet, 200 feet. That's where the air is moving, and it would get sucked into that air intake. The filters we had at the time just couldn't work with it. So what happens is it chips away at the compressor blades, causes uneven flow into the combustion chamber. What happens is will happen a lot. The combustion chamber blows up. When it blows up, it shoots a flame back up through through and out the front of the engine, and it incinerates everything in its path. So it incinerated that whole combustion chamber. You now you're in auto rotation and you're on fire. So you're not, the good thing is you're close to the ground, but we had a lot of people get injured. I was a Huey pilot. Hueys go back. They go back to the Vietnam War. So we were doing ash and trash, which she was talking about. We were, actually that's medevac, that's a VIP, it's anything like combat. And we were going back and forth to the war, but we had these engines that, bam, it would blow up. And, I mean, you just had this smacking on the ground, and a lot of people got hurt. So we had the Blackhawks that were there that eventually replaced the Hueys, and then we had the Hueys. Guess who the commander of the 4th Infantry Division grounded for these compressor stalls? The Blackhawks. The new technology that was in place. Sometimes the older stuff is more robust. And that doesn't, not just helicopters, I think. So anyway, and so when that happened, the Hueys had to pick up the load, I had to put down my books, and had to start flying. So I flew a lot during the ground war and then into Iraq. And that problem was just a learning curve. That was the technology, and that wasn't just the only thing we were dealing with. Okay, so I want to talk stories real quick. Some personal stories that happened to me. Oh, there I am. So this is the guy, we had the OH-58 Delta guys that actually were up in the front right after, and remember how many of the Iraqis gave up. They had been in that war with Iran for 8 years, and they were just done. They didn't want to fight us, so they gave up, threw down their weapons, and that is a Republican Guard AK-47 that was given to me by one of the guys. And he got a clip, and I'm actually out there firing it. So we didn't get to bring it home, so hopefully it's in a museum somewhere, because it shoots really well. I hate to say it. So anyway, that's oh, here, I'm so sorry, I got this out. That's an Iraqi T-72 next to our M1 Abrams, the 4th Infantry Division, and this was actually an armored unit. But they put them side by side out there right over when we went into Iraq and the war was over. So you could see the difference between the two, and I just thought I'd include it here. All right, so here's a real fast story, I gotta tell it real fast. So we had, when I arrived there, when everybody arrived there, we had no navigational aids. How do you get to some place? We didn't have NDBs, ILSs, there was GPS, but the Army had not certified it for helicopters. So we had to go back to what you learned when you were 12, what do you call it, 12? It's called dead reckoning, time, distance, heading. You had to get out your plotter, you had to plot your course, everybody was spread out, all the units were like all over from east to west, and then when we went into Iraq, now they're north and east and west. So we had to figure out the direction and figure out the wind and set the course and go. Well, take a look here. There was no, when we moved, all the units moved into the desert, there was no underground plumbing, there was no septic system. There was, basically, we didn't have Johnny on the spots there when we arrived, so what the Army Corps of Engineers built was that. Oh, there it is. So was that. It's plywood, I'm sorry you can't see it, it's not close up, but it's there on the bottom right. But it's plywood, has a screen, inside has a bench with 4 holes, and they used the bottom of the potbelly stoves, and they would collect the waste. This was our latrine, what they call latrine. Now, the Army has a more eloquent name for it, and they, excuse the language, it's called a shitter, and then what they did is they would burn the shit. So in this, and they had to do it several times a day. Now, I'll call it latrine just for appropriateness, but what would happen for us is we would take off, you plot a course, and all you have in front of you is the desert. It's brown and blue sky for miles and miles. It's like 2 million miles of desert over there in that Arabian desert. So you go, and every 20 minutes we had to switch pilots because you actually, at 100 feet, flying at 100 feet, it starts your brain starts doing crazy things and you can fly into the ground. So you switch it over to another pilot who's more fresh, take over. We went back and forth. Well, here we are, we're on a tour, and that's all you're seeing. All of a sudden in the distance, I see this smoke. And I said to myself, fly to the smoke. So that's what we did, flew every time. It got us to the base we were going to. And it was because they were burning the shit. So that became our nav. Our nav, it never fails. Just like, remember the Indians and the smoke signal? It works. It works. So anyway, that was another learning. Okay, real fast, I gotta tell this really funny story. So we were in this camp, so you're in a camp out in the middle of the desert, pretty close to the front, near Tapline River. You had to wear designated uniforms. Okay, 5 minutes, I'm gonna try to tell this fast. So you had to wear these your uniform, your flight suit, your BDUs during the day. Women don't wear earrings back at that time, it's different now. So, I can't tell this fast.
Take your time.
I know, she wants me to, she said, I know, but you guys want to eat cake. I don't want to eat cake. So, I'm just thinking about the cake, I can't think about anything else. So anyway, you can wear what you want at night. So I had my khaki pants and a polo shirt, and it gets very cold in the desert, believe it or not. We had our cots. I was with this female Lieutenant Alvarez. She was over, with those two of us. We were the only women, and we were in this tent. So you have really warm sleeping bags. I will say that for the Army. I had really warm sleeping bags. But anyway, khakis, polo shirt. My mom gave me this like 3 times my size sweatshirt of Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse has ears about this big. And then I wanted to keep the holes open in my ears. So, it's a real, you don't want to have to come home and jab that post through. So I had those big old bangle earrings that you used to have, like hanging from a chain. Anyway, so I was socialized, I went back up and I was laying in my cot. All of a sudden, kaboom, kaboom! It's like, oh my God! And immediately the siren starts going. Now it's 11:30 at night. So I jump up, I grab my MBC, I grab my gun, I zip open the flap, and we're kind of in a big perimeter area. Nobody, there's nobody. So I look back in and I looked at her, I was like, what are you doing? And she's getting dressed. She's putting her uniform on. I'm like, what the heck? So I go to our bunker. Now, the bunker we built, they use backhoe, it's in the ground. Everything has to be in the ground. They dug this bunker out with little seats on either side, put plywood over the top, and then put sandbags. And dusty, dirty steps to get down in it. So I get down in it, and I'm sitting there by myself. The siren's going off. We just had this big kaboom, and eventually my crew chief, Sergeant Howdeshell, comes in. All he has on are those, those men that wear those real tight biking shorts, and nothing else. And he had a helmet and boots. And he had an ammo belt that for a 50 cal, which are the big bullets, going over his shoulder, and he's carrying this big, a whole bunch of guns on which he had the 50 cal, the M16, probably had a sword, a cannon, whatever. So he gets in there with me, and he kind of puts it down, and he sits and he looks at me, and I'm like, are we screwing up? And he's like in shock. He's not saying it. Eventually people come in. Everybody's in uniform. Everybody's got their flight suit, they got their BDUs, they're looking good, they've got the gloves, they've got the boots, everything. And I'm like, oh, we have screwed up. So I'm like, I'm gonna go out and go get my uniform on. I go up, start up the sturdy, dusty steps, and I have the commander coming down there. And he says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm gonna go get my uniform on. He says, no, you're not, turn around. So I turn around, I sit down. He sits down next to me, and it's dark, we're in a bunker, a few people have a flashlight. He starts doing the accountability thing with the flashlight. So he's going around, making sure everybody's there, coming around, and I'm watching. And so finally I realized, oh, he's on me. Well, I swing around fast, and my earring takes flight. Now, I stay in my ear, but it's now like chain, one of those saws, zoom. And it just misses his cheek. And he's just kind of looking at me, and he's like, oh my God. And then he puts the light down to see what I'm wearing. And all he sees is too. I'm kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to get kicked. I know they're going to send me home. So the next day he calls this mandatory meeting. Everybody went there and he said, yesterday, every single person here would be dead except for 2 people, Rambo and Mickey Mouse. That's a Huey. I'm so sorry about this. I flew Colonel Hotop. You know, remember in Syria where they destroyed the UNESCO site? They were worried about that too. So I did a lot of flying up in Mesopotamia. It's called the cradle of civilization between the Euphrates and the Tigris. That's her. That's in the Bible. And they're excavating. They were okay. Everything's so far. I don't know what's happening there. But, and the oil fields, those oil wells. 700, by the way. And the people, we had Red Adair go out, but the Ministry of Kuwait went to the world and said they took all our infrastructure, Saddam took all our infrastructure, we need help. And 40 nations responded with 10,000 people that came. Those oil wells, not only did you tap a fire, but they snapped the valve. You get the fire out, now you're gushing. That's our crude oil. It took millions of years to make it. And it's now just gushing. So they had to, and they put mines around the base. I mean, they really sabotaged everything. What was going to take 3 to 5 years, they did in 9 months. Those guys are heroes that did that. So anyway, thanks, bye.
Okay. So we have Kelly Dobson and Susan Augst out in the audience. So any questions you have for Laura or for Terri, raise your hand, they'll come, you can say your question, and they will answer you, okay? Laura, put your helmet on.
But don't mess up my hair.
Come on.
How will my hair look?
That thing looks like it weighs 20 pounds.
Wow.
I don't have a question, but I gotta say, I learned a lot about the Army today. Good job.
This one over here, this is what the ultimate uniform became afterwards. This was that's me in 1990, 99 or 2000, one of the two. But you can see the difference in the uniforms, and you can see the difference in the helmet and the difference in the equipment. You can still see out the rear end. But anyway, all things considered, the packs and everything, but you can see the transition from the uniform to what we ultimately had when we were fighting in the Gulf Wars and Judge Street and stuff.
I have a question about the helmet. Is that for a man or a woman? When I flew, I had to wear men's uniform, flight uniforms, men's helmets. Is that a female helmet?
No.
Okay.
All
You
helmets
think
are
by
the same.
now, I flew from 77 to 80. You would think by now they would accommodate us women.
I've never had any problems with the whole.
You must have a big head, Laura.
You're right. I have a fat head. Right about that.
I just want to say that I am so grateful that I was in the United States Navy. That when I deployed for Desert Storm, we went on our ship and we had our bunks and we had our racks, we had bathrooms, we had all the supplies you could ever want, we had meals, we had air conditioning and eating.
Keep it up, I can still hurt you. And mice and all kinds of in a tent.
I am so,
People were
I
in
am
five-star
so,
hotels.
everybody Navy say go Navy!
One question for Vicki. Vicki, your story is compelling. All the stories that we hear are compelling. I'm sorry, Terri.
Terri.
Have you recorded this in any way?
Have I recorded it in any?
Have you recorded your story or told them the excerpts or written any
You know, I
excerpts?
touched on so little because there's so much, because every one of the points I made, there's long stories about all of it. But, you know, I was told that, and I came to the realization I'm old. You know, I had someone tell me that one day. They said, oh my God, Terri, your history. And I'm 75 years old, and I am history. And I thought, damn, you know? So I am. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe that'll give me something to do.
Okay, time's up.
All right, thank you so much, Terri and Laura. So many things that never happened in the early 70s in the United States Navy, for sure. Next, I would like to introduce to the podium David Whitaker, President of Mid-Florida Historical Appreciation and Preservation Society. And you may remember him from last year. He's back with us, and also back with us today is Dr. Mary Walker, or our own member, Clay Gish, dressed as Dr. Mary Walker. I think they're coming. And they're going to come up and confer this year's Top Hat Award. So in case you weren't here last year, Dr. Mary Walker is the only woman who has received the Medal of Honor. And after they gave it to her, they came back and tried to take it back. And she pinned it to her suit. She wore the outfit of the day that was to make you feel more comfortable. She wore men's pants with a woman's skirt over it. And she pinned that medal to her chest and said, "You want it, you come and get it." And they didn't.
Yes, I'm channeling Dr. Mary Edwards Walker today as a way to honor her service and her courage. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about her. The hat is a little big for me, but she wore a top hat as well as a suit with her medal attached. And when the Civil War broke out, she went to Washington, D.C. and tried to enlist in the Army as a surgeon. And because she was a woman, they refused. So what she did, she volunteered to be a medical personnel. She ended up working very near the front lines and helping wounded soldiers. And in fact, she became so good at it that they gave her a contract. So she was the first woman who was under Army contract during the Civil War, and she ended up working across the enemy lines as well, treating soldiers on both sides of the conflict, and sometimes perhaps gathering a little information for the Union Army. She ended up being arrested as a spy, and literally, right after she concluded amputating a soldier's leg to save his life, they came into the operating room, arrested her. She spent 4 months in a Confederate prison under horrible conditions, which impacted her health seriously. At the war's end, she was traded. There was a military exchange, so after 4 months, she was released. But at the war's end, 2 different generals recommended her for the Medal of Honor to acknowledge the extraordinary service she had provided. She was awarded the medal by President Andrew Johnson, and for over 50 years she wore it right on her lapel. And she was a feminist, she was an activist, she did a great deal after her service, as well as continuing her medical practice. So 50 years later, the Army is going through its roles, and because she wasn't technically commissioned in the Army, through no fault of her own, they tried to take it back, and she's like, nope, not giving it back, and continued to wear it on her lapel. And, but it was reinstated by the Army during 1977, during President Jimmy Carter's administration. So, and she remains the only woman to have received the medal. Not that she's the only one who earned it, she's the only one who's received it. So anyway, the top hat was a part of her everyday apparel. She wore it better than me. And hers probably fit better than this one. So anyway, she's somebody who I think we all need to remember and acknowledge, because women may have only been integrated into the permanent services 78 years ago, but they have served always. So.
That we do this, Clay. I just enjoy seeing you being the historian and having the hat and telling the story, because it is very important that we remember that she is still the only female Medal of Honor recipient. Of course, that will change. But for now, we want to pay recognition to that. And so in the historical group we're with, the Mid-Florida Habs, and I'd like to have them just stand up really quick over here. That we came up with a thought with the Tri-County Women Veterans Group in terms of what can we do together to honor Mary Walker. And so this has been a collaboration for a couple of years. And actually, this has proven to be more eventful than I even thought. I was in college during Vietnam. And so at that time, they had the lottery. And so my number wasn't selected, and I stayed in college, and so I never got to serve. But the thing is now the Marines Detachment 1240 has taken me on as an associate member, which they asked if I would join. Bob Grenier's already an associate member there, and Mike was also asked to be, because we've done a lot with the Medal of Honor system, male and female, throughout the year, and they acknowledge that fact. So now we're learning a lot about being in the service, and so it's been an honor in my life right now to sort of extend that on. But the reason why we're here today is to let you know we pay tribute to this honor for Mary Walker, combining our organizations of history and with the women's veterans groups, so that we can have these awards for people that are, well, for women that are distinctive in their fields. So it can be military or civilian. And so each year we've done this. As you know, a couple of years ago, we kicked it off. We put a top hat on Betsy as a thank you. And actually she became the first recipient of the Top Hat Award. And then the next year we had 8 more recipients. This year we have 6. And one of those people honored is here today. And so we are very, very proud to carry on this tradition. It's growing and growing, and I appreciate our association so much. But I'd like to have Betsy tell you about the person before we give the award.
Every successful organization needs a visionary. Ours just happens to carry a calculator. Today, the Top Hat Award goes to Denny Elwood, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer of Tri-County Women Veterans. Denny served this mission with courage, commitment, and a very healthy respect for the budget. She is often heard quietly asking, "Did we budget for that?" Or my personal favorite, "Who approved that expense?" Since 2021, Denny has mastered the fine art of making spreadsheets look exciting, balancing budgets without breaking a sweat, and somehow always knowing where every penny went, even though the rest of us are still looking for the receipts we owe her. While many people see events, programs, and accomplishments of our organization, Denny sees invoices, reimbursements, reports, and financial details. Those details make these successes possible. It's not always glamorous work, but it's essential. Today we honor Denny not only for her dedication, professionalism, and attention to detail, but also for the countless hours she gives to our mission and to the women veterans she serves. A round of applause, please. Denny leads with integrity, vision, strategy, and the rare ability to say no to an expense without anyone taking it personally. She is proof that leadership can be both fiscally responsible and fearless. What I admire most about Denny is that she never saw Tri-County women veterans simply for what it was. She saw it for what it could be. She believed in our potential, invested in our future, and helped build the strong foundation that supports everything we accomplish today. Denny, your commitment, reliability, and willingness to tackle the numbers so the rest of us can focus on the mission make you truly deserving of this recognition. So it is with David's, Dr. Walker's, and my great pleasure to present this Top Hat Award to our treasurer, Denny Elwood, because when it comes to stewardship, service, and keeping this organization on solid financial footing, you truly rise above the rest. And Denny, one last thing. I want to thank you for never fainting or giving me the hand. When I come to you with another idea that begins with the words, "This probably isn't budgeted," but, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Denny Elwood.
Hold it up higher.
There you go.
So I want to say thank you. I'm very shocked and surprised and humbled. All I do is run numbers and remind people what's in the budget, what's not in the budget. But I'd say the thing that I say most often to everyone is, where's the paperwork? I know you spent it. Yes, I'm going to give you some money. I need the paperwork first. Betsy knows that one really well.
Does she follow it?
Well, that's why she knows it really well, because sometimes she doesn't.
I'm in training.
And she has been proven to be very trainable. When I first joined Tri-County, we were transitioning from being a social group to being a not-for-profit. And I did see a vision that this could be an incredible organization. Because of all of you. So thank you very much.
Along with that comes $50 and a candy bar, probably the Milky Way, because you're out of this world. Turn this back over to Denny.
See, Betsy's very trainable. I've told her early on that I like candy. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to have some dessert. Okay, first they're going to cut a cake with a big Army saber or Navy saber? Navy saber. We were using Army sabers for a while, but.
Whoa.
Yeah, they did.
Very good.
Thank you, Denny. As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this. What we experienced here wasn't just a program. It was a reminder of what happens when women veterans are finally in the same room, speaking the same language, and yes, relieved of not having to explain half of what we're talking about. But that's who we are, and yes, we laugh. Because if you served, you know humor isn't optional, it's survival. But underneath all of that humor is something very real. This is what strength looks like. Not loud, not performative, just steady, and still showing up anyway. And to our women veterans, as you leave today, take this with you. You are seen, you are valued, you are not a side note in history. You are the headline. And as you are part of a sisterhood that understands what you carried, even when the rest of the world didn't have the full picture. And to our family members and guests, thank you for standing beside our women veterans today. Your presence is not passive, but it is powerful. You help ensure that our service is seen, respected, and remembered. In closing, I have some special thanks. I would like to have our two speakers come up to the podium. To our speakers, I'd like to present this coin to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And my special thank you to the 4 event coordinators. Basically, Kelly directed this whole thing. She's our vice president. So round of applause. And her team of Terri Friend, Carol Kalinowski, and Denny Elwood, and I have a special gift for you.
Are you getting a picture of that too?
Thank you to the 4 of you. Your hard work made today seamless, and if anything went wrong, we didn't notice it, which means you did your job perfectly. Thank you all for being here, for your support, and being part of this incredible sisterhood.